Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Before we get stuck into February's plan with me, I thought it would be good for us to take a step back and see where we are and what we've done in January. So this year I'm going to do a country a month with a theme that we pull out of a hat. And for January I pulled Ireland and famous exports. So instead of doing Guinness and whiskey and rainbows and leprechauns, I decided to take a different route, and I decided to look into the Aran sweater. So on the front cover there, just printed out a photo of the Aran Islands and drew a ball of yarn there on the neck spread, and then I decided to do an illustration of the actual jersey. With a very inspiring creative quote there that helped me through the month. January, I didn't have a lot of time and honestly wasn't feeling very inspired, so instead of drawing, I decided to print out photos and stick them in my journal. And I guess that just shows that you don't have to draw all the time. You can put in photos, you can do craft paper, you can do whatever makes you happy. So for February, I pulled Greenland and landmarks. So I know nothing about Greenland, and this was going to be an interesting theme. I decided to start off with a cover spread of the illicit ice fort. I don't know how to say that. I'm sure there's a geologist watching this who'll be able to tell me what that is. But here's a reference photo in the top left there of what I'm actually attempting to paint. So once the pencil sketch is done, it's time to start mixing paints. I started off with mixing ultramarine blue with a bit of white, and then to try and get a turquoisey color, I started mixing in some yellow, but I started off with yellow ochre, which just dirtied the color a bit, so I ended up getting out my lemon yellow, and I would suggest starting with those colors and just ditch the yellow ochre. Don't use it, it wasn't useful. So once you've got your colors all mixed up, it's time to start painting, and honestly I really enjoyed this painting. It was so much fun. I haven't touched my acrylic paints in probably 2 years, so it was a little bit difficult in the beginning, and I had to try and remember what to do and how to do it, and probably not the best techniques, but I honestly really had so much fun with this one. Really enjoyed it. And yeah, I thoroughly suggest that if you do have some paints or some mediums that you haven't tried in a while, go back to them, because you might surprise yourself and actually end up loving it. So this first layer is just a base layer of getting kind of the blocking in the color and getting the tones down, just to kind of start to get an idea for the different colors and shapes in the painting. It's not meant to be final in any way, and I guess that's what I really like about acrylic paints, is that they dry quickly and you can just paint over it. So in a few places, and you'll see that place on the right there is one of them, I just painted over them and kept painting and painting over it until I got what I needed it to look like. And I really enjoyed that, because with watercolor you don't get that ability, and you know, you can work it to a point and then it just becomes muddy and gross and doesn't work. Whereas acrylic paint, you can just you can keep going and painting over it until you get what you want. So I just lifted it up there, you saw it, so I could see. Normally when I'm doing an acrylic painting I would be on an easel, but I also didn't want to set up my camera in that way, and which just would have been efficient. So working on the table there was a little bit challenging, just to see perspectives and colors and how things looked from afar, but we managed to make it work. And then what you do is you mix up your different colors, your different tones, and you kind of just go in and start putting in all the little details and things. So start with kind of the mid-tones and dark tones, and you move your way up to the light tones. So I haven't quite done that in this painting. I swapped around and started with different bits and pieces, which isn't 100% right, but it worked out in the end and I enjoyed painting it, so it doesn't really matter how you get there in the end, right? So long as you have fun getting there. at this point I decided that my palette was too messy and I wasn't able to mix the colors I needed, so I just transferred the wet paint that I still had onto a new palette. And when I do acrylic painting, I use a tear-off palette, which is very useful because acrylic dries hard and it's essentially plastic. So having that tear-away palette that you can just tear away and throw away when you're done, instead of trying to scrape clean a palette from acrylic paint, is incredibly helpful. And one thing I should also mention is that I am painting on acrylic paper and not on normal printer paper. I find that it really helps to use the right kinds of paper, especially when it comes to watercolors, which this isn't, but when you're using the right kind of paper and the right kind of brushes or even paint, your paintings just work and you get to have fun with them instead of struggling with them and fighting against them. So I highly recommend that. You don't have to spend all the money on the most expensive acrylic paints. I've got cheap student grade acrylic paints, but just having the right tools, having the right kind of brushes. You don't have to get the expensive ones, you can get the cheaper ones, but getting the right shapes, getting the right papers and that kind of thing. It is a little bit of an investment. You don't have to go on the high end, as I said, but it does definitely help that you're not fighting with your painting, that you can enjoy doing it. So I mentioned that I really enjoyed acrylic because I could go over things, and those mountains there on the right hand side of that iceberg were one of those areas. I couldn't get it to look right. I was trying to use the reference photo and it just wasn't working. So I decided to leave it there, come back to the iceberg, add in some final details and textures and kind of give it a bit of more of a icy kind of roughed up look, for lack of a better word, and then paint over those mountains on the right hand side. I tried some sponge work and it was horrible. So painted over it in white and a little blue and let that dry so I can start again, because it just wasn't working. And that's the beauty of acrylic paint, it's just so lovely. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking my palette knife with some white paint and I'm just putting in some white marks there on the shoreline just to show where the ice is and where the water is up against the horizon. I think if you know Bob Ross, this is stolen from Bob Ross, and I'm sure almost everybody watching this knows Bob Ross. So I decided to use a little Bob Rossing technique over here, and it actually works really well, especially when you start putting it in the water, just to show those lines in the water and stuff. So that was something new that I'd never done before that worked really well. So so long as you're doing new things in all the things that you're doing and you're learning new techniques, then that's great. That's the point of painting, isn't it? And there you go. Don't those mountains just look so much better, and they fit in with the theme. So that's that painting done. Throw away the palette there, and now for the most exciting part, the removal of the tape. And it just brings the whole painting together. Having that crisp line around the painting, it just makes everything stand out really nicely. And that's it for the painting of cover page. And now I had to cut it in half, which hurt my soul a little bit after all that work, 6 hours of painting this painting, and I had to cut it in half. But it's okay. It's fulfilling its duties. And then I just wrote February there, so I know which month it is. And there we go. There's my painting in my bullet journal, and I'm actually really pleased with that one. So moving on to the next spread, which is going to be my goals and habit tracker. I am using a font that I found on the web from the font. I will link it down below. I think it's called Nordic, which is very apt for this theme. I tried a new habit tracker in January. Normally I do those little calendar boxes. I tried to do more of a linear a graph-like tracker in January, which worked really well for me. I preferred it, so I'm trying it out again now in February. And then on my goals, I'm deciding to do between 3 and 4 goals in a month and making sure that I achieve them. On the bottom part of this spread, I really wanted to draw a picture of the hot springs that are in Greenland, that are heated by the volcanic activity there. I drew that with my brush pens and I hated it, so no more painting. I took out my gouache paints and decided to redo the painting in my gouache paints, which actually turned out much better, and I really like this little painting now, and that worked out. So after going on about using all the right papers and things in my acrylic painting, I just used a piece of paper from my bullet journal that I'd used for a Dutch door previously. So just a scrap piece of paper, and because it's so small, it worked out really well, so there wasn't too much issues there. I think if it was painting directly in the journal it would have been a problem, but the fact that I had taped it down to the table helped it handle the water and the gouache much easier. So after giving it a quick dry with the blow dryer, it was ready to remove the tape, just cut off and straighten up those edges and stick it into the journal, and I think that looks much better, don't you? I think that looks so much better. And that finishes off the spread, and I'm really happy with this one. Very simple and clean, and yeah, I really like it. The next spread I'm going to be setting up is my meal and thoughts tracker. I didn't like the word brain dump, and I'm trying to figure out a new one, so I thought thoughts might be a good one. We'll see if that sticks. So again, whipped out the gouache paint here and decided to paint the Glacier, I think that's how you say it. And after doing all that acrylic paint where you start with the darkest colours and move up to the lightest colours, I had forgotten that you should, for gouache and watercolour, start with the lighter colours and go darker. It's all very confusing, all the different mediums, so that's why I messed up a little bit there on the left hand side, but oh well, it worked out. Gouache isn't watercolor, so there is a little bit of leeway there that you have to play with. And yeah, just very simple layers here to get the glacier to come in with the snow and the black rock of the mountains. And then I just added a little whale in the sea there, because apparently Greenland is a really good place to go whale watching on the boats and things, so I thought I'd just make reference to that. The reflections in the water I thought were going to be quite difficult, but actually landed up to be quite easy, and they came out really well, so I'm really happy with the way that worked out. And then yeah, just putting out the hairdryer. Very quick tip there is to pull out your hairdryer when you're doing watercolors, and gouache just helps to dry it, so you don't spend hours waiting for things to dry that really could be dried with the hairdryer. And there is the end of that spread, and it came out really well. I really like it. It has the similar theme, that icy cool feel, and I really do like the way it turned out. Okay, my next spread is for my calendar spread, and I knew this isn't a landmark, but it's Greenland, and I had to do the Northern Lights in my spread. I just had to. You can't have a spread of Greenland without the Northern Lights, so I had to put that in. And that's what I'm painting here. Again, I'm using watercolor this time on watercolor paper. I tried to do this directly in my journal. It did not work at all. You need the watercolor paper because this needs to be very wet for the colors to blend into each other and kind of stand out and blend, and you get that merging like of the lights, and you have to use watercolor paper. I couldn't figure out a way to do it directly in my journal. So just to orientate this, I decided to put a little person standing on a mountain looking up at the lights, and then sprinkle on some stars. Made a bit of an oopsie there, but just a paper towel and smush it and it'll come off. So happy little accidents. And yeah, that finishes up the spread. So just removing the tape, and then I'm going to cut it out and stick it so that it frames my calendar, and it just really brings the calendar spread to life. I absolutely love the way this turned out. The watercolor paper is quite thick, and if you are pasting it directly into your journal, you probably need to use quite a bit of glue. Be very generous with the glue when you stick it in, just to make sure that it doesn't come out, because that would be the worst thing ever. And when you're sticking things in on either side, make sure that you've got a bit of a gap in the middle there, a white line. That little white line just keeps the page from folding over and causing more issues than you need. So I'm one of those people that really like a block calendar. When I do my journal planning, I need a lot of space every day to write in my deliverables and project management things. So I need these block calendars, and I decided to use just a light grey brush pen to add the dates into the calendar, and that just finishes up the spread. This last spread is for my first weeklies, and it is just a simple gouache painting of the Northwest Passage in Greenland. I started off with just mixing up a orangey pink, and it's just the most beautiful painting with the pink sky of the sunrise or sunset, with the icebergs and the blue ocean in the foreground, and it's just absolutely beautiful. My camera cut out here, so I don't have footage of me drawing and painting up these icebergs and ocean, but you get the feel. It's really simple to put together. So just to finish this off, I am dividing my page into 3. I only set up for the main days of the week, Monday to Friday. I don't have a to-do list for the weekend. I use just the simple tasks on the bottom right there to do any home tasks or weekend tasks that I need to complete. And that finishes up my spreads. So as we go into the flip through of all the pages that we've put together, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked this video and you appreciate the work that went into all these paintings, please hit the like button, consider subscribing, and I'll see you back here in March. Cheers!